Hello. What's up, everybody? Great to be hanging out with you guys again. Telmo, always awesome seeing you. Glenn, Chris, good to see you back. Hello again. Cucho, Mike, awesome seeing all of you guys. Thanks for hanging again. Today is comping. I want to just jump right in because we kind of have a lot to cover. Hopefully, you guys have been following the fundamentals-driven approach we've been discussing so far. Right on day one, we discussed the overview, like just the basic big picture of things. Day two, we talked improv. No scales, no chord tones or arpeggiating. Not that those can't be used, but that's not really what we see when we analyze the melody of great tunes, right? We see triads, we see melodic tension or resolution. These are the building blocks, like the bricks that we can build these beautiful cathedrals and bridges out of. Today, we're going to attempt to look at a very similar idea of deconstructing comping down to its fundamentals so that we have a more direct path to practical daily ideas that we can work on to get them into our playing. So normally, if I was like guest lecturing at a college, I would ask a couple questions. I would ask people to raise their hand. Obviously, I can't do that here. So I'm going to ask a few questions. I want you guys to enter a Y into the chat box for a yes or an N for no. Okay. Just so we can interact a little bit. Type Y for yes, N for no. Has anyone ever told you that you should be practicing, let's say, your drop 2 chord shapes with all the inversions? So like C major 7, if you want to get better at comping, you should take C major 7, turn it into drop 2, right? And then move through on a string set the inversions of that drop 2 voicing, so that you end up with 4 different shapes for C major 7. Okay, I see a lot of Ys. I see 1 N. Oh, 2 N's, a couple of N's. Okay. More Ys than N's, which is to be expected. That's a very common thing that we see taught in jazz guitar education. And then generally they would recommend that you move that around to all of the string sets. So, you end up with a whole series of different shapes for one chord. Y or N, yes or no? How many of you have been told that you should be taking any voicing? It could be a 4-note voicing, it could be an inversion. Let's just stick with the C major 7 shape and move it up and or down diatonically through a key signature. For example, right, this is just a basic chord scale. This is key of C major with 7 diatonic chords because I'm just playing basic 1, 3, 5, 7 ideas. Okay, now we're seeing lots of Ys. Cool. This is actually really interesting for me. So we had a few N's, a few no's with the drop 2 inversion practice, but it looks like there's 0 no's for this. Both of these are very common things that I've seen be taught in jazz guitar education at college, in books, YouTube videos, everywhere you look. Clearly, there's a lot more of the chord scale running than the inversion among this group, but both are very common and both are helpful. Okay. Now, here's the big question: yes or no, Y or N? After doing the practices everyone's told you, yes or no, are you still frustrated with your comping? That's the most important question. Did either of these practices get you to the level where you feel like you're actually comping in a musical way? And be honest, like don't take it personally. This is not a slap in the face. This is not a bruised ego. This is just, let's be objective here. Our chord scales and or the inversions of your drop 2, drop 3, whatever type of drop chord you're using, are they still leaving you feeling frustrated as a comping instrument? Mark's the only no so far, so that's awesome. I'm stoked for Mark that he's not frustrated. Everybody else is putting Ys. In fact, I see a few people putting Y. Howard, I definitely feel your pain. Okay, this has nothing to do with a personal problem from any of you. Like, this is not like, oh, you're just not talented enough. In fact, having taught a lot of musicians, I can tell you that the biggest thing holding you back from improvisation and comping in a more fluid, organic, joyful way is the story you tell yourself. Like almost every musician I work with, because I don't really work with full-blown beginners anymore, not very much anyways, almost inevitably the very first thing we have to do is address like the mental story of like, well, I just don't practice enough. Well, I'm not talented enough. Well, I don't have this. Like it's this like clutter, this mental clutter. That's never the reason. Like it's just not. That's a self-limiting belief that is holding you back from just taking action on doing the basic things we have to do, which again, to go back to Bill Evans's quote, stop trying to approximate things, be realistic about the big picture of what we need to accomplish, and then learn to control things on the most basic, fundamental, elementary level. This is super common, and we're going to discuss how to get past it today. Chris, the Barry Harris 6 diminished scale still didn't get me moving enough. Yeah, so the Barry Harris scale is a great way, his 6 diminished sort of chord scale is a great way to begin getting into what I'm discussing, but it's actually a pretty advanced look at things. It fits into the bigger picture of what we're going to discuss today. So there are essentially two fundamentals, in my opinion, that make up great comping. And before I jump into them, let me explain why the two practices that I just asked you guys about still leave most guitar players very frustrated. Okay. Oftentimes to the point that they just let the piano player comp and they hide in the back, the back area behind the stage, behind the horn players. They turn their volume down, right? We're just not really sure what to do. And because we don't comp, because like we're nervous about it, so then we don't comp, so then we don't get better at it, so then we stay nervous, and then we just keep wanting to let the piano player have all the fun, and it becomes this like vicious cycle. The reason that these two practices are helpful but don't seem to translate to less frustration when comping is that they're not about comping. These two practices are about harmony. And comping and harmony are not the exact same thing. They're obviously related. But harmony, just like we discussed in improvisation, right? Everybody kept asking me about vertical thinking, chord tones. Makes total sense that that's where the brain goes because that's what we're all taught to think. So the mind only knows how to understand things based on vertical thinking. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, like over and over and over. Oh, new chord, new 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. Like that is a good way to be able to understand things on the paper, but great melody moves through time. Yes, there will be moments where we will see a melody moving through time and all of a sudden it'll, jump up through an arpeggio and then it'll keep moving forward. But the bulk of great melody, when we really analyze it melodically, is not just running up and down vertically, it's moving horizontally. Comping is very much the same way. Comping is about chord movement, right? As opposed to really cool pockets of vertical stacking. That is important, and we are going to talk about vertical stacking for really hip voicings. We're going to talk about that, on day 6 at Melodic Triad Magic Day. But that is not the fundamentals. That's not the foundation of comping. The foundation of comping is about learning to move through time. We want to carry the music forward, but instead of doing it with single notes, we're doing it with chords, okay? So when you're practicing drop 2 inversions all around the fretboard, you're getting to know the fretboard, you're getting to know inversions and harmony, vertical stacking, but it has no context. It's not moving. Okay, it's like learning a really cool vocabulary word that sounds really hip, but you never actually understood how it fits into a sentence. Do you put it before the noun or after the noun? Right? Is it an adjective or is it a verb? How do you use it? What function is it? What purpose does it serve to communicate? And the whole point of communication is to tell a story. Okay, that's what comping is. Comping is storytelling. Harmonic storytelling, and storytelling happens through time. There's a starting point, a middle point, and an ending point to any great story. Okay, so once we contend with the fact that all of these practices that we're told to do are really more about vertical thinking and sort of momentary thinking, hopefully that will let you relax and understand that that's why you're still frustrated. Chord scale movement is actually a type of movement. It's not really specific to vertical thinking, although very often when we move an inversion or a voicing through stepwise motion through a diatonic scale, the purpose for that very often is simply to find new vertical voicings. And even when it does move, it's just super diatonic and vanilla. And how often do we see that in great tunes? We don't see diatonic stepwise motion in chord progressions all that often in music, in great jazz. It's there, okay? Just like scale runs are there and arpeggios are there, but it's not the bulk of chord progressions, which means you're training yourself, you're spending all this time to work on movement that we don't really see all that often. So what are the fundamentals of great comping? The first one is groove. There's no way around that. Like, I don't care how hip your voicings are. I don't care how cool the movements are. If you don't groove, it sounds wrong. Not bad, just wrong. Like, jazz developed out of dance music, the blues, and basically show tunes, right? It was like those three elements coming together that evolved into jazz. And then that evolved into bebop, post-bop, modern jazz. Right now we have music where people sit in a chair the whole night, and if you do your job well, you get a round of applause at the end of your solo because you're doing great. But it evolved out of jazz, out of dance music. So that element of it has to stay there. If we're not grooving, everything sounds wrong. If we are grooving, you could sit on one chord and you could kind of make it work. I made that comment recently, and somebody responded that they had watched a video of Thelonious Monk performing, and it was, I forget which tune it was, but it was a rhythm changes, and the whole A section, he's just pounding away at one chord over and over and over and over. I don't know which video it was, so I can't go watch it to figure it out. My guess is it was either the tonic or the dominant. It was either the 1 or the 5. Okay, or flat 2 dominant, the tritone sub. But he was just pounding away on this one chord in this very interesting rhythm while the drum is swinging away, while the saxophonist is soloing. And the whole thing worked. Why? Because he was playing with confidence, with mojo, and he was grooving hard. That's all that you ultimately need. Number 2, groove is important. Move. Okay. Yes, it can be really cool and hip to sometimes just sit on one chord, but I would think of that as the anti-move, which is a form of movement, right? Nothing is a type of something. Nothing is a something. Lack of movement, if you understand how to move, lack of movement is a form of non-movement. It's like you're in a whitewater rapids current and all of a sudden you hit a whirlpool and it starts swirling you around and you're not moving downriver anymore. Now you're being held in place. It's a lot of potential energy. It's like a bow and arrow. You're pulling the string back, the bow back. It builds up all this momentum that when you let go, it's going to fly forward, right? So the very first thing we have to do is just learn how to move, and then we have to learn, groove, and then we have to learn how to move. Once we know how to move, then we can toy around with this idea of not moving, but that's a form of movement. You're creating the potential for movement, okay? Again, the chord scale running up and down thing is a type of movement, but it's a pretty weak type of movement that we don't see that much. And if you're not putting it into standards and into musical situations, then it's to be expected that you would still be frustrated with your comping. So let's look at a real world example of this and kind of break it down and see what this actually means for us and see if we can come up with just some new ways of thinking. Let's take one of the more boring, tired tunes we have in our tradition that a lot of musicians, once they reach a certain level, don't even like playing anymore. Autumn Leaves. Okay, we're going to do it in the key of E minor. The first chord, if you know the tune, is going to be A minor. Glenn, I'm happy to hear that, man. Other approaches are always helpful. A minor, D7, G major, right? 2, 5, 1 to G major. Then it goes to the 4 chord, C major. Then it's the 2, 5, 1 to E minor, to our tonic minor. Okay, if you're looking at the PDF, if you're on YouTube and you want to grab the PDF, it might be helpful. Click the link in the description. It'll send you over to the website. You can register for the masterclass. The PDF is on our website underneath the video. If you're on the website, just click the link below. A minor, D7. Okay. Most people, if you're at least in your intermediate stage, are probably going to go ahead and put an E7 or 8. Why? It's not. I don't think it's actually written in the real book, but most people instinctively put an E7 there where it should be an E minor. Why did they do it? Movement. Right? This is like a tiny little one simple version of what I'm trying to express here. The form is taking us to E minor, but then we have to get back to A minor. We have to return to the starting point or move to the next section, right? We're repeating an A section. That E7 craves movement. It's not an intellectual idea. Dominant chords are not 1, 3, 5, flat 7. Dominant chords are that. Like that is a dominant chord. It's this like crunchy, pent up bow and arrow being pulled back that wants to get thrown forward. Okay. If we're only thinking about them intellectually, then it becomes a game of chord tones. It becomes a game of rules. It becomes a game of theory, of mental stuff versus a game of like heart and gut. Like, what does it feel like it wants? It wants to move. Okay. And E7 wants to move to A minor. It can go in other directions and we don't always have to give it what it wants, but it wants movement. Okay. That's why we put the E7 there. Now, that's only one stupidly simple little tiny version of movement, and we only throw it in at the very end. Which is why a lot of people get bored with this chord progression, because on the surface, it's like, well, okay, 2, 5, 1 to major, 2, 5, 1 to minor. How many times can you play that before you're just done with it? Like, we want to move to other keys. We want to explore. We want to try all these different ideas. So let's look at a real world, very high tier level of comping on this tune. Those of you who've been hanging all week, you know my whole story. I was hanging out, performing, playing, studying, hanging with John Schofield and Peter Bernstein and Brad Shepik and Alan Ferber and Stefan Harris, all these great players. And then I got sick, lost the ability to play, and then I had to relearn. So I want you to scroll down to the bottom of the page. If you're on the official website, if you're on YouTube, you won't find this, but you can register in the description below. Scroll down at the bottom of the page. I posted a very short video of me playing duo with Peter Bernstein. Okay, and we're playing Autumn Leaves. And there's tablature underneath that video of Peter's comping. Watch the first 10 seconds of it and chime in on the chat box. I'm going to shut up for a minute. Chime in the chat box and tell me, what is the first chord, not the first note, because he plays a single note first, but what's the first chord that Peter Bernstein plays over Autumn Leaves? Everybody go watch it real quick and tell me what's the first chord Peter Bernstein plays. Right on the top of the form. David, I couldn't agree more. Chris says B flat minor 7. Is anybody else going to agree or disagree? Should we get into a big argument about it? It's supposed to be an A minor 7 chord. Like, we were playing this tune in the key of E minor, so the first chord is A minor. Telmo, if you scroll all the way down at the bottom of the screen, the bottom of the web page, if you're watching this on our website, not on YouTube, it'll be all the way at the bottom. You can't miss it. It's pretty big, but I tucked it all the way down because I didn't want anybody to spot it early. Yeah, for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and say that I agree with Chris. It's pretty obviously a B flat minor 7 chord where there's supposed to be an A minor 7 chord. That's what's most important. We're not playing in a different key, right? It's supposed to be A minor 7. If you open up the real book and you saw A minor 7, almost every one of us would start on A minor 7. Pete starts on B flat minor 7. That's it, Howard. Then he moves. Right? You guys see it? Telmo, you're welcome, man. So he's vamping, he's grooving on this one note. Right, this B note. This is over the E minor. Okay? He's vamping on a B note. And then over the first measure, when we get to the top, he plays B flat minor. He doesn't play A minor until measure 2. Most people would be playing the D7 by then. They already played A minor for measure 1. Now they're on to D7. Maybe if they're fancy, they put some passing chord between. But Pete jumps right in and plays B flat minor for the first measure and then moves to A minor for the second measure. Glenn, he does not play C sharp minor yet. Later he does in that whole example. It's a pretty short video. There's a moment where he does play a C sharp or D flat minor 7. B flat minor 7, right? The 6th fret is B flat. This is a B flat minor 7 shell voicing. Shell voicing is 1 3 7. In this case, it would be a 1 flat 3 flat 7. G minor 7. Who plays G minor 7 there? There's the C sharp or D flat minor 7. Okay. Now, at the top of the next A section, I only showed you the first A section. At the top of the next A section, he again comes back to that B flat minor. Okay, so measure 1, he's playing the wrong chord. Measure 2, he does play a D7, but he sticks it in between 2 A minor 7s, which is not that uncommon, right? D7 and A minor are sort of kind of the same thing. Measure 3, I'm ignoring the pickup measures. Measure 3 is supposed to be G major 7. He plays A flat minor to D flat 7. So these are wrong chords. Measure 4, C major 7. That's the first measure where he actually plays the chord that would be listed in the real book on the downbeat without playing any other wrong chords around it. Measure 4. Okay, we're halfway through the A section already, and he's finally getting to a place where he's playing a right chord. Okay. Measure 5, he gives us the F sharp root note. Right, it's an F sharp half diminished chord. He plays F sharp, the root note, immediately leaves it and plays G minor, a wrong chord. Then back to the F sharp. He's actually just playing a minor 7 because there's no fifth in this. It's a shell voicing. There's B7. He finally gets to E minor. And he holds it for, 3 beats? And immediately jumps to a D flat minor. Then starts moving back towards that B flat minor. I'm stealing some of his ideas here, but now I'm playing different chords from him. Here, I played B flat minor and just walked that one chord chromatically down all the way. How about F minor? So I'm just walking from B flat minor to E minor. Okay. Why does this work? Because I'm focused on groove and on move. I'm grooving and I'm moving. That's it. What if we start? Let's move the B flat minor chord up. Let's say C minor. this is pre-rehearsed. I'm just taking some of the ideas that Pete did. Here I started on A minor. I started on the right chord, but I walked up to C minor. I think I went to F7 next, like a 2-5. And then I think I did E minor, E flat 7, E flat minor, A flat 7, D minor, G7, G minor, F sharp half diminished 7. Okay, why does this work? Besides the fact that it grooves and it moves, it works because I'm headed towards a point. Again, I'm not talking about vertical harmony right now. We're going to discuss hip advanced voicings in 2 days when we do melodic triad magic. I'm not talking vertical harmonic thinking. I'm talking horizontal movement. Where do I want to take us, and how am I going to get there? I want to get to E minor. That's my target, right? That's where I want to go, and I have 8 measures to get there. And there are all kinds of ways to get to an E minor chord. You don't have to play A minor 7, D7, G major 7, C major 7, F sharp half diminished 7, B7, E minor. That is a way to get there, and it's the way that's written in the real book. But it doesn't mean it's the right way. It just means that it's a way. It means that it's how somebody wrote it down in a book. It's how somebody recorded it that way. But it is not the only way. Okay. Again, don't get stuck in the theoretical academic realm. Bill Evans once said, jazz is not intellectual theorem, it's feeling. Don't get stuck in the intellectual realm. I'm not trying to make an argument about a theoretical idea. I'm pointing at what Peter Bernstein played, which is, to me, a super hip way to comp over this tune. And I'm just pointing out what's happening, right? He's playing some right chords, he's playing some wrong chords, but what he's really doing is moving through the tune, okay? I like to use this as an example sometimes for why movement is so important and why people get so bored with Autumn Leaves, when really what they're bored with is their own sensation of freedom, or the tyranny of playing the real book changes over and over and over and over and over and over and over. New York City is an amazing town, right? There's a lot happening here. We got a lot of tourist traps. We got a lot of local stuff. Like it's a cool place. If you came to New York and always stayed at the same hotel and always visited the same tourist spots and always walked from the hotel to those tourist spots following the exact same path, after a couple of visits, you're going to start to think that New York City is really boring, because you're always seeing the same thing. You're always experiencing the same thing. You're always seeing the same people. You're always smelling the same smells. Like, it's a very boring way to visit a city, right? You're just over and over and over. Hotel, down 5th Avenue, right on 38th Street, I'm at the park. Then you head back, west on 38th, and you head south on Madison or whatever, 5th, wherever I just said a minute ago, you're back at the hotel. And then the next day you walk down 5th Avenue again, but this time you turn left on 38th and you go to this other park, and then you go back. And then the next time you visit, same thing. And then the next time you visit, same thing. Like, yeah, it's fucking boring. Like, don't do that. Instead, explore. Like, there's so many different ways you can navigate the city. There's different places you can visit. You can take the subway, you can take the bus, you can ride a bike, you can hail a cab, you can walk, you can rent a helicopter ride. Like, explore, be curious, be creative, look for new places to visit in the city, right? Meet local people. When I play with Peter and he comps like that, there's like no way, if you're paying attention, if I'm paying attention, there's no way that I can just fall back and feel bored with Autumn Leaves, because every moment is like, whoa, I've never seen this before. Like, I have no idea where I am. Like I know the map of New York City. I know the form of Autumn Leaves, but at no moment was I able to just fall back on like a riff that I already knew. I was constantly thinking like, I have no idea where I am. I gotta head north. I gotta head west. Like I know how to get where I want to get, but how I'm getting there is totally brand new. It's a very exciting feeling. I sometimes liken it to being out in the middle of the ocean, surfing on a giant 50-foot wave. Like, there's no land in sight, right? Peter's on a boat over there, and I know he's gonna swoop me up if I fall and like land in the water. Like, I know I'm not gonna drown, But my whole job is like, okay, here comes the wave. Here's the momentum. Here's the movement. It's building underneath me. How do I stay on my feet? And how do I turn this into a ride? As opposed to, here's the G major scale. Here's the E minor scale. Okay, here's the turnaround. Here comes the E7 chord. Like, that's a very boring way to play music. And if it's boring to play, it's boring to listen to. Jazz evolved out of dance music, the blues, and show tunes. All of these are about joy, movement, emotion, dance, like physical embodiment of the human spirit. Comping is harmonic storytelling about a form. That's ultimately what it is. So if you're only practicing vertical harmony and wondering why it's not converting into better comping, why you're still frustrated, it's sort of like you're getting really good at making a still picture, like a painting with really great detail. Like, it's beautiful, but it is never going to help you tell a story in the same way that like an animated cartoon will. Even if the animated cartoon has less detail, if it's not as beautiful to look at, you can see these moving pictures and they will convey a story. There will be a beginning, a middle, and an end. You can have character development. You can have plot twists. You can have conflict. You can have tension resolution. You can have all these wonderful things happening, even just with stick figures, right? Like, I remember being a kid at school and like drawing stick figures like in the corner of the page in the book, and you would like flip the book and it would make it look like the stick figure was like running or something. That's a form of storytelling, and you can say a lot more when the images appear to be moving than when you have one still image that just looks really cool. Like, you can express an emotion there, but it can't take somebody somewhere. You can't get that character development. You can't have plot twists, right? That's the art form of comping. Comping is about how do you take this dead, lifeless piece of paper, this idea, and breathe life into it. Okay, you're sort of like a puppeteer. You want to pick up this lifeless thing and wiggle your fingers and make it look like it's dancing and moving. It's not. I mean, it's just 12 sounds, but the artistry of it is how do you make those 12 sounds feel like they're alive and appear to be moving and dancing. That Peter Bernstein example is a beautiful example of it. Nothing about it sounds stale or dated or old. It doesn't sound like what you would expect somebody to have played back in the 60s or the 50s, or even most musicians today would not be that engaged in the form. Why? Because they're bored. As soon as you're bored, your creativity turns off and then the tune sounds bad. And because the tune sounds bad, you become more bored. And because you're more bored, your creativity shuts off and the tune sounds worse. And it's this terrible cycle. So how do we break out of that cycle? Stop worrying about finding the coolest voicings and start thinking about movement. Where do you want to get to and how can you get there? All the different ways that you can create movement can't be squeezed into one 30-minute video. So I'm not going to go super deep into it, but just look at what Peter's doing. There's chromatic movement, right? He's using B flat minor to take us to A minor. Okay. He's using like a tritone subdominant, A flat minor to D flat 7, resolving to C major 7. Right, that's a tritone subdominant. That D flat 7 is the tritone of G7, and it resolves to C major. Okay, there's all these different types of movement that he's using. That's the kind of stuff that we want to start thinking about, practicing, and working on. One final point that I want to bring in and use to start to wind this down is that, again, in order to help us break out of thinking vertical and start thinking horizontal, when you're looking at Peter's example, try not to let yourself think about any of it in terms of a chord substitution. Okay? Nothing he's doing is a substitution. A substitution is still rooted in the idea that there is a right chord vertically that we can sub out and put something else in its place. It's still an isolated idea. Like, it's still the concept that this is a chord on its own. And then later there's a chord on its own. And then later there's a chord on its own. Instead, what he's doing is improvising harmonic pathways. Okay. He sees where he wants to go and he's just taking a different path than you're used to. That's it. It's not that he's subbing in something in place of something else. It's that he's looking at movement. How can I get from here to here? Well, I can go up and across. I can go down and across. I can go up and then down and then up again and then across. I can go straight across. I can switch hands. Like there's so many different ways to get from here to here. But if all you're thinking about are these two things, then you're never going to start thinking about all the negative space in between it and how you can navigate through it. So for the sake of resetting a healthier mindset about what comping is, try not to get stuck in the idea of a chord substitution. Start thinking about harmonic pathways. Okay. How do we get where we want to go? You come to New York City to visit and maybe we're friendly, we've met and we decide we're going to hang out. So I'm like, okay, you're going to be at the airport. I'm going to be at home. Let's meet at that bar and grab a beer. You're going to get to the bar in a different way than I'm going to get to the bar, but we're still both going to end up at the bar. Does it matter that I'm taking a different way to get there than you? No. We're not going to be together during that period, but we're still going to end up at the same point. As long as we end up at the same point at the same time, and you're not like 6 hours late, we can still have a beer together. So it still works out in the end. Will it create tension? Musically speaking? Yeah. What's wrong with tension? As long as there's tension and resolution and everything is being done in an intentional, controlled way, tension is super exciting. Like, when's the last time you watched a movie without tension, without a bad guy, without drama? Like, nobody makes movies like that because they're terrible. They're boring. Like, no one wants to watch something that has no drama. We want drama, and then we want closure. Some people like open-ended drama. That's fine too. Just be aware that if you comp like that, you might piss a lot of people off. We do have to be careful with this stuff. If it's not grooving and if you're not heading towards a point and you're just playing nonsensical pathways for no reason, you might not get called back to gigs. I'm not saying that you should play anything you want at any moment for no reason. I'm saying that the reason should be the tune. What are the important milestones in the form? Can you pick one and move towards it? There's a big difference between that and just playing anything. Okay. All right, we got to wrap up. Let me just check in, make sure no one's melting down in the comment section. Tomorrow we're going to do a Q&A. If you're watching on YouTube and you want to hang again, click the link in the description, register. I'll send you the link so you can come and hang at the Q&A. I'll be taking some questions tomorrow. Jim from Stockholm, awesome. Yeah, time zones are a bit of a challenge in the world of online education when there's 24 different time zones, but glad you can make it. Can't we just explain the G minor 7 and approach chord to F sharp minor 7? Yes, absolutely. That's like literally what I'm trying to express here. There's a variety of ways we could theoretically explain it, okay? But ultimately it's about movement. How is he trying to move? It's a tension chord that carries the form to F sharp half diminished, or really he's not playing the flat 5, so it's like an F sharp minor, but he's implying half diminished. Notice that almost every chord he's playing, other than the B7 sharp 9, almost every chord he's playing is a shell voicing, 1 3 7, which is like the simplest, most, to again quote Bill Evans, most elementary type of jazz harmony. No extensions, no fancy voicings. He's not trying to steal the show from me sort of playing the melody / solo. Like I'm kind of soloing, kind of playing the melody at the same time. He's not trying to be the front man here, right? His voicings are very low key, 1 3 7 for almost every voicing. It's about the storytelling, right? That's worth noticing. Again, the only chord, if I remember correctly, that he plays as even remotely interesting or advanced on its own vertically is the B7 sharp 9, which is a B7 shell voicing with the sharp 9 on top. 75% of that voicing is just a shell voicing, and then there's a D natural note sitting on top of it. Everybody wants to approximate the really complex stuff, right? Like Bill Evans said, but can you just control the elementary fundamentals of music. Peter is using shell voicings. Those of you who study with me know that I obsess all the time over triads and shell voicings. To me, if you can control triads for melody, shell voicings for harmony, you are a more or less unstoppable, complete jazz musician. We are going to take that further in the Melodic Triad Magic Day on Saturday, because we can combine them and start coming up with very advanced voicings and some more unique pianistic approaches to the guitar. But at the end of the day, if you could express melody with triads using quadratonics, chromaticism, and if you can comp creatively through form with shell voicings, like you won't even recognize you're playing anymore. And all you have to do is master triads and shell voicings. Everything else is gravy. Like if you want to put other stuff on top, that's great. These are the fundamentals. Jerry, all anticipatory harmony. Yeah. It's an emotional, like visceral thing of like, what is this? Oh, here we go. What is this? Oh, here we go. What is this? Oh, like it's just constantly, tugging us along, pulling us along, taking us to the ultimate destination. And then as soon as he gets to that destination, that E minor, he leaves it. And it's on to D flat minor, which he then uses to carry us back to the top of the form. So we really get very few moments of like, oh, I know where I am. Unless you know the form really well. Howard, is he resolving then the two main resolution points in the tune? I'm not sure which two you're talking about, but he's obviously resolving to E minor at the end of that A section. How does soloists deal with these substitutions on the fly? Did they try to catch the harmony or just play traditional harmony or both? That's kind of the fun thing about playing over this type of comping, is that obviously if you know, like next time I play with Peter and I kind of know that he likes to start in B flat minor, I might decide that I want to play over that. But in the moment, because I didn't know what he was doing, it forced me to just pay more attention and take more risks, right? What's the worst thing that happens is that I play a note that doesn't quite match up perfectly with his harmony, but a split second later, his harmony is moving anyways. So that's still thinking, that's still worrying about the vertical stuff rather than the horizontal stuff. Like just move. As long as you're moving and everyone's heading in the same direction with the same goal of bringing the tune to life, it can work, right? Peter, a metaphor that he once used with me, I know we're kind of getting into tomorrow's stuff with the Q&A, but a metaphor he once used with me to help me understand this concept of movement is like playing pinball, right? You count off the tune, you pull the lever back, let it go, and the ball goes flying up into the air. And then the whole point of the game is just to keep the ball going. It starts to fall, you whack it with the paddle, and it goes back up, and you get all these points, and it sticks around, and then it starts to fall, and you whack it again, and it goes back up. Like the whole point of the game is how long can you keep the ball floating around, banging against the bumpers, moving on the ramps, getting points before the ball falls. It's very similar to that idea, that concept. Okay. It doesn't necessarily have to be as extravagant and out there as what Peter was doing, but that idea of movement and harmonic pathway freedom is to me why so many people feel so stuck with comping, because we're so focused on this idea of vertical thinking versus just learning to move. Okay. It doesn't have to be a lot. You could just throw in one simple little extra chord here and there, and that could be enough to get you excited and re-engaged into the music. I got to run. Come back if you have questions. Come back tomorrow. We'll do a whole Q&A session, and I'll hang for about 30 or 40 minutes and answer everyone's questions. Thank you guys for hanging today. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you head over in the description to the link to grab the PDF. I don't think I've asked anyone to do this yet because I always forget because I'm bad at internet stuff. But like the video, subscribe to the channel, whatever the hell people say on YouTube. I don't use YouTube all that often. But thank you guys for hanging. Tomorrow's Q&A, then we're going to get into some really wild melodic triads magic stuff, which is where things get extremely different from everybody else. Already, hopefully, you've seen that things are different. Melody, improv based on triads, quadratonics, chromaticism, harmony based on movement, specifically focusing on the shell voicings. My challenge to you guys over the next 24 hours until the Q&A is to take a tune. Autumn Leaves is a great one to do it with. You can do it anything you know really well, and just look for opportunities to move. Just explore, experiment, right? You're a little kid and your parents just moved you to a new house and there's a giant forest in your backyard. Like, just go look at stuff. Pick up rocks and throw them. Pick up sticks and bang them against the different trees and see what they sound like. Like, just look for stuff. At the end of the day, you always know where the house is. You can always come back to the house, right? But just go explore. Like, that's what improvisation is supposed to be about. Comping is a form of improvisation, but it's a form of improvisation that relies upon chords, and it is our responsibility, both as soloists and as accompanists, it is our responsibility to engage with the form. So tell a story about the form, right? Like, look ahead and decide where you want to head to. Maybe you want to head to A minor, that very first movement for Peter, B flat minor to A minor. He's targeting A minor, but he's not playing it right away. He's taking us somewhere else first, and then he's bringing us there. You fly to New York for us to have a beer, and I'm like, hey, before we have that beer, you got to come check out this new statue. We still get to the beer, but now we get to go see a statue first. It's just more fun. It's more exciting, right? So take chances, see what happens, give it a shot, record yourself, and then try and improvise over it. See what it feels like. Maybe record yourself comping the way you normally would. Like, don't worry about movement or exploration or curiosity. Just comp like the basic changes and improvise over that, and then record yourself attempting to add a little bit of movement in, okay? And see what it sounds like. It might not sound great right away. I'm going to go ahead and guess that it won't, because nothing sounds great the first time you try something. But it's a mindset, it's a habit, it's a daily practice. The more you think that way, the more you behave that way when you're alone with your instrument, the more natural it becomes. And then the more obvious and easy things get. And then when you're actually playing with friends, like, then you have a foundation to stand on, a level of confidence, a swagger, a mojo to your comping, where you're not just stuck, playing big fancy voicings with no context as how to use them to do anything exciting. And you're not just stuck, this is the big one, you're not just stuck repeating back the melodic phrase that your saxophonist ended their line on, right? Bibidoo-ba-dum, ba-ba-doo-ba-dum, boo-dum-dum, boo-dum. Like, don't do that. Imagine being in a conversation with someone and every time you make a comment, they repeat the last 3 words back to you. Like, yeah, it's nice the first 1 or 2 times they do it because you realize, like, oh, they're paying attention, they're listening to me. But eventually it's really obnoxious, right? Because like you're just like, why are you doing that? Stop it. Like, engage with me, have a conversation with me, disagree with me, agree with me, ask me a question, say something different, like partake in the collective storytelling. If we're not able to tell a story on our own, we can't engage with the collective storytelling of the group. Okay, so think about all these things, explore them, come back tomorrow, ask some questions, we'll delve in, and then on Saturday, we'll get into the melodic triad magic stuff, which is where triads and shell voicings come together, which is, we're going to discuss some solo guitar, some advanced voicings, some advanced melodic improvisation ideas. There's going to be some really hip stuff that we're going to get into. I'm excited to share with you guys. Yeah, let's wrap up. We'll take questions tomorrow. Thanks for hanging. Happy practicing. See you guys tomorrow.